it's great to know that the Constitution was written to limit government, and and liberty exists with solutions for every time. There's not any time when liberty does not work, when following the laws of the land, when doing what's right, does not work. And so we just have to figure out. Good evening, sir. Would you like to join our town hall meeting here? We're going to talk about some of the issues.
I see how y'all doing. Y'all not hungry? Huh?
Okay, who would like to order food?
Nobody.
Okay, 70's going to order food? Okay. I'll probably order some later.
Y'all have a good day then.
Okay. And what's your name, sir?
James.
James? Okay, I'm Josiah Magnuson. I'm actually a candidate here for State House. So, you vote for me. All right, thank you, sir. So, all right. Well, what we're going to do is my campaign manager, Aaron Talmadge, is going to come up, and we'll go from there.
Like Josiah said, I'm Aaron Talmadge. It's really great to be here tonight. Super excited. Always like being part of town halls because it really does give us an opportunity to hear from the candidate and, not just hear from a pulpit, but get to hear from somebody on a one-on-one basis, really get to know them for who they are. Really quick, we are going to open up with a word of prayer from Josiah's dad. So, really quick, that's what we're going to open up with, and we'll jump into things.
Where there is no vision, the people perish. Father, thank you for the privilege we have to have life, to have eternal life through your Son, to have a political life, an ambition toward being an influence in this state. And Lord, we just ask for wisdom for Josiah and for each one here tonight, that you would work in our hearts in a special way, that our minds would be clear, and that our focus toward the future would be understood, and that we would have prudence. Thank you again, Lord, now that we can meet together, and we pray that your blessings will be upon each one because of this night. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, to get things started again, my name is Aaron Talmadge. I'm the campaign manager. So after tonight, and you all are enthusiastic volunteers, make sure you come and find me. We are happy to get you signed up and immediately volunteering and going door to door. Not really, no one likes going door to door, but at least telling your friends about it, posting on Facebook. When Josiah called me about 4 months ago, and told me that he was going to be running for State House, and asked me if I would be, his campaign manager. Of course, I was like, I'd love to be your campaign manager. It's a great idea. But then I thought to myself, I was really like, why would someone so smart and so bright and with great character want to run for politics? I mean, that just sounds like, two opposite ends of the spectrum. Unfortunately, we don't have the brightest and best politicians here in South Carolina. But then I quickly realized that's exactly why we want someone like Josiah running for politics here in South Carolina. It's good. Come on in. We'd love to have you. Is why I quickly realized, have a seat at the table. Is why I quickly realized that we wanted to have someone like Josiah here as an elected official. Not just someone who is more interested in lining their own pockets with backroom deals, but someone who who's more interested in benefiting the state than benefiting themselves. Josiah has been involved in politics since he was a teenager. He may look young, but don't let his fresh look discourage you. He most certainly is one of the brightest and has one of the strongest characters of anybody that I've ever met. He's been involved since he was a teenager. He is, like he said before, he's the director for Americans for Constitutional Government, which was founded in 1960. So we imagine that a group that has such age chose to have such a wise leader and someone with, again, outstanding character. He has lobbied in Columbia on behalf for all of us to fight against Obamacare and pushing for legislation that would have made it illegal for state officials to mandate Obamacare, and also would have had the state declare Obamacare as an unconstitutional bill, and which in fact passed the House and had a lot of momentum going into the Senate, but because of a technicality, Josiah, the bill that he lobbied for, lost because of politicians like Mitch McConnell that found backroom deals, wanted to benefit themselves and not the people of South Carolina. Wanted to find ways to uplift themselves and not the state. Now I know that we can all agree that when it came to the gas tax, that we have politicians here that wanted to see us pay more at the pump and not make decisions for ourselves. They want the government to decide where our money should go before we can decide where our money should go, before we even have an opportunity to be a part of that. So that's what we're running against. We're running against people who want to see gas tax go up. We want to see the government be more involved in our pocketbooks before we are. And that's one reason I enthusiastically am supporting Josiah and his efforts to run for State House. So I could stay up here all day talking about how awesome of a guy he is, how much he means to me, and how much he will mean to you. And win or lose this election, I promise you that you are going to continue to hear his name for years to come, through and throughout this state, pushing things left and right, fighting for you and me, whether as an elected official or not. But I hope you will join me in welcoming our next House member of Spartanburg House District 38, Josiah Magnuson.
Well, I really appreciate Aaron Talmadge, and he's been a great campaign manager so far. One of the best things, right, exactly. We have a long ways to go, right? One of the best things about Aaron is that he's an encourager, and he's always, lifting me up and explaining how we're going to win this campaign. It's a David and Goliath fight. There's no doubt about that. My opponent has a lot of name recognition and so forth, and he's known in the district, but he has not been standing up for what's right. And I think that's where you come in, and that's where I come in. It's our responsibility and our role, to seek to replace him, and that's why I'm in the race, because I believe that I'm right on the issues that he's not. So to be very frank. But seriously, he does have a lot of concerning things that he's done, and we'll talk some about that tonight. And I'm going to give a little bit of why I am running, and then I'd like to hear your questions, because mostly this race is about you, not about me, and it's about the issues, and that's what I want to hear from you tonight. What are your concerns, and I want to help you to have a voice. So before we start out, I can pass this around. It's not the best, but you can see where the district is. It's the orange and dark line. You can kind of take a look at that. Also, just want to, before I forget, don't want it to slip my mind, I do have some material up here. And also, if you'd like to make a contribution, I'd like to have that as well. I do have some forms tonight. It's the end of the quarter. So, this past Saturday, we had a very special event. March 26th, 2016, was the 240th anniversary of South Carolina independence. How many of you knew that? Don't raise your hand. South Carolina independence, March 26th. On our state seal, there are two dates: July 4th, 1776, and March 26th, 1776. Now, what happened on March 26th? Because, South Carolina was the first state to declare independence from Great Britain. 240 years ago today, or not today, but last Saturday. What happened was one man stood up to the British Empire, and his name was Chief Justice William Henry Drayton. And William Henry Drayton issued a formal adjudication stating that King George III had abdicated the government. To understand why, we have to go back a few months to December of 1775, when Parliament passed what was called the Prohibitory Act, and the King approved it. And what that did was it withdrew the protection of South Carolina and the other colonies from of the King. Now, under common law, protection and allegiance are reciprocal. That's a common law maxim. Protection and allegiance are reciprocal. That means if the King withdraws his protection, the subjects are no longer, they don't have to give allegiance. If they withdraw their allegiance, on the other hand, the King doesn't have to give his protection. But the King was declaring that by withdrawing his protection, he would no longer rule as a king under the British law. He would rule as an emperor. He would rule by conquest and by tyranny. And so Chief Justice William Henry Drayton ruled that King George III had abdicated the government. He had withdrawn the protection of South Carolina. Therefore, South Carolina, under the law, was free and independent. And our leaders of our state, we drew up a national constitution, and we elected a national president, John Rutledge. Now, how many of y'all knew that? My dad knew it. He's smart.
Last week.
March 26th. So last Saturday was the 240th anniversary of that happened. That happened here. And even not just too far away, just a few miles down the road, if you go up Highway 11, you can find a battlefield, Battle of Cowpens, where the tide turned in that war. And South Carolina was at the center, at the heart of the American War of Independence and what happened there. And we have a leadership role, there's no question, in our country and in history. And I believe South Carolina needs to take that back up again. We need to remember our heritage. We need to understand where we came from so we can know where we're going.
That's good, yep.
My opponent is one who has no respect for South Carolinian heritage, and we can get into that later, but what I have to say tonight is we need leadership, and we need people like William Henry Drayton who will stand up for what's right, who will do what is according to the law, regardless of the consequences. Chief Justice William Henry Drayton had no assurance that his adjudication of law would ever be respected or ever be known in history. He literally was putting his life, his fortune, his sacred honor on the line, as the founders wrote later. And, you know, he's little known to history now, but at least, but he wasn't marked as a traitor. He could have been. But he stood up for what's right, and that's what you and I need to do today. And that's what I would like to give you the opportunity of doing on June 14th. Right now we have a country that's under threat from, establishment politicians. And my opponent is a pro-tax establishment politician. He's a trial attorney who appoints judges, and then he goes and practices law in front of those judges. He's introduced legislation to limit your gun rights. He has introduced legislation to eliminate parent-controlled homeschooling. The list can go on and on. But what I want to do is to address two major things here quickly, which is the gas tax issue and the issue of judicial reform. Because my pro-tax opponent voted to hike the gas taxes, and he is proud of that. So, what happened? On April 15th of last year, my opponent was in the legislature, and he voted for a 12-cent increase on, per gallon of gas, which is about a 72% hike, I believe, if my math is not off there. And that would be the largest gas tax hike in South Carolina history. Now, he believes that revenue is the problem, that we're just not throwing enough money on the bonfire. Well, I'm here to tell you that throwing money on the bonfire is only going to make the problem worse. It's just going to build the bonfire. What we need is reform in our transportation system. And there's 4 points that I believe are necessary, and I'll hand these around. And maybe, Elizabeth, could I get you to help me for a second? And these, just give everybody one copy. And I have to apologize because the front page is not, I'm sorry, there's two pages that go together. It's a front and back. And what you'll find is that I have 4 points that are clear points on reform, what we can do to fix our roads without having to increase revenue. Now, in order to understand why we need reform, we have to first understand how we got to where we are. The key here is to understand that a power structure right now controls transportation money. Just a handful of legislators appoint or choose who can be elected by the legislature to the Transportation Commission. Also, we have something called the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank. And what the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank does, or STIB, is it gets our state into debt. That's the only thing it does. It'll issue bonds, and then on those bonds they'll build projects, basically. And they're crony projects. Okay? One of the best examples of this is out in Florence, because that's where most of our money goes right now, is Charleston and Florence, and a little bit to Myrtle Beach. That's where the lion's share goes right now because of the way that the system is structured, the power structure in Columbia. But what happened is in Florence just recently, there was a proposal for, in the district of a guy by the name of Hugh Leatherman, who is a state senator who controls a lot of where this money goes. And he has a part interest in a construction company, a concrete company. Okay, but they were going to build a road out in the middle of nowhere. It was a one-lane road. They were going to widen it to 4 lanes. Well, a group of folks from something called the Coastal Carolina League, Coastal Conservation League, I believe it is, some of their activists went out and they laid down on this road because, you know, I mean, it's a busy road, right? Because it needs to be widened. Well, they laid down on the road. They were just laying there on the road resting for over a minute before a car even appeared in sight. So this is the kind of places, that's just one example, but that's the kind of places that our money is going, to these special interests and pet projects. So it's just frankly false when you hear people talking about how much money we need in increased revenue. There is some money that we need, but we also have a huge surplus right now. We have a lot of extra money because our economy has been growing, and a lot of that is recurring. So what do? We reform the way that we're spending the money now before we consider raising taxes. Okay? And I have 4 points on how we can do that. Number 1, we do need to abolish the state infrastructure bank. Again, the only thing it does is put our state in debt. And what it's being used for is an establishment crony system to throw money at the problem and, you know, fund pet projects. So let's get rid of it. Number 2, we need to make the State Department of Transportation accountable directly to the governor. And as we mentioned, there's just a small handful of legislators that controls the money right now. It's called the Joint Transportation Review Committee, and those people basically, they approve candidates, and they'll approve their cronies, because, you know, you need people who are experienced in the field, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
But they elect, they control, and that's the same thing with the judicial system, which we'll get to in a minute. Now we need to eliminate that power structure, and I believe we need to put the Department of Transportation directly under the governor. Now there have been some moves in that direction already. The problem is that they really just haven't gone far enough. There's even a bill in the legislature right now that allegedly puts it under the governor. What it does not do is it does not eliminate the Joint Transportation Review Committee, that's the heart of the problem. That's where the crony deals are coming into play, along with the State Infrastructure Bank. But it doesn't do that, and it does not give the governor the authority to hire and fire the commissioners. So if you don't have that, then who are they accountable to? They're still going back to be accountable to whoever their cronies are in the legislature. And that is not right. So we need to eliminate the power structure, put the SCDOT under the governor. Number 3, let's follow the law. The local government fund. Okay, right now on the books, the local government fund, by state law, has to be fully funded. That's a priority. It's not being done. The state is basically ripping off the counties. The state has a certain amount of money they have to give to the counties every year, but they're not doing it. And so we need to fully fund that. But then once we're doing that, I believe we can start to give some of the roads back to the counties. Because South Carolina, as of 2015, the latest figure that I saw, South Carolina has the 3rd longest road system in the nation. Here in our state, we have the 3rd longest. So I mean, that's, you know, we're up against, you know, California, Texas, Alaska, all that. The reason is because in most states, the counties control a lot of the roads. And here in South Carolina, it's all the state. But we need to start to transfer the state roads to the counties, and this is something that my opponent and I do agree on. So it's not enough to just transfer roads to the counties, though you have to fund it, and, you know, that's one thing I think we may have some differences. But then the 4th thing, and this is also very crucial, because this speaks to many other issues, not just the transportation. We need to begin weaning our state off of federal cash. You know what the reason is why we can't stand up to the federal government? Why we can't declare things unconstitutional, like we mentioned earlier? Why we can't exercise the 10th Amendment? A lot of that is because we're dependent on the federal government. So you can't bite the hand that feeds you. And right now, actually, federal money constitutes over a third of our state budget. Now, how many of y'all knew that? Over a third. Federal money does always come with strings attached, not always in the moment. Okay, sometimes they'll have these little exceptions to things, but 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, they determine. Because why? Because you always can say, if you're the one funding something, you're going to say, well, I want this money funded, used this way. If I give you $10 and I tell you, and there's a salad that costs $20, I don't know, but you have to use that $10 to buy the salad, and then you have to use some of your money to buy it. And if you went and I can tell you how to use the money. Anyway, we're not going to go off in the weeds with all that, but you get the idea. You get the idea. In specific to the transportation issue, what's happening is we're building all these new roads, and the federal government will help to pay for new roads, and so they'll give us money for that. Now they won't help with repair, they won't help with the maintenance of the roads. So a certain percentage of the transportation money is always having to go to building new roads. So we're building and building and building and building, and we don't need it. But the money's there, right? So you got to have it. No, you can have virtue, you can have courage, you can say, no, we don't need your money. Okay, we are going to uphold South Carolina independence, going back to William Henry Drayton. We're going to be our own state. We want liberty, not just a handout. So as long as the legislature is taking federal cash, we're going to be building roads we don't need, and that's going to cost us more money, so we need to get off of federal cash. That's what it comes down to. I will not vote for new revenue until all of these reforms are implemented. Second thing is judicial reform. Now this is very crucial for me because my attorney opponent is going down to Columbia and he is voting on judges. And then he'll come back up to Spartanburg and practice law in front of judges that he helped to appoint. Okay, now, if Zach's an attorney and Artie's an attorney, and I appoint Artie and Artie appoints me to a judgeship, am I more likely to favor Zach, or am I more likely to favor Artie? If Artie was the one that appointed me, and I'm going to be back up for re-election soon.
You're a good man, Artie.
See, so here's the thing. In my opinion, in my firm belief, it is an unfair conflict of interest for lawyers to appoint judges. We need to change that antiquated system. Now, it's not my opponent's problem per se that, that's the way the system's run. But what I will say is I don't believe we need to elect any more attorneys to the legislature as long as the legislature is in charge of the judicial system. We need to elect people who, common sense people like you and me, to go down there and make those kinds of decisions. But what ultimately needs to happen is we need to put the jurisdiction over the judicial system, over appointing the judges, under the governor as well. That's another area where we need accountability. And we can do by advice and consent of the Senate. That's how the U.S. Constitution is written. The state constitution is different. 1898, because of segregation and a lot of issues there, they wanted to keep power. Okay? Well, we don't need that anymore. We don't need an 1898 system. We need to go back to actually what the founders' vision was. The U.S. Constitution has judges appointed by the President with advice and consent of the Senate. Let's go that direction, with South Carolina. And it's more checks and balances. It's a better system that way. So, a couple other things then about my attorney opponent. Not only does he go and he votes for judges, Again, I believe that's a conflict of interest. He also votes for more power for a certain committee. Remember how we looked here, we said the JTRC, the Joint Transportation Review Committee? Well, there's also one like that for the judiciary. And that's also controlled by a very small group of legislators. And that's called the Judicial Merit Selection Committee. Fancy that. And they determine who gets to be a candidate for a judge and who doesn't. Well, my opponent is voting to empower that board, that small group of legislators. He wants them to have more power over the system. Which again is moving in the wrong direction. It's moving toward unaccountability to people like you and me. So, if we are going to restore accountability and transparency, if we are going to defeat this gas tax hike that's totally unnecessary and allows the crony deals to continue, if we are going to change the system so that we can fix our roads in the long term, if we're going to change the judicial system so that we can have justice and fairness again in our state courts, then we need to change the people who are taking our state in the wrong direction in the legislature. And that's where you and I come in. And I'm running for State House because my opponent has not taken a stand on these issues, and in fact he's moved away from reform. And I ask for your support, your contributions, and your vote. Thank you very much for your attention. What questions do y'all have for me? Again, I want to listen to you, and I want you to share your concerns as much as you are willing to share them. I also have an issue statement. Anything you'd like that we don't cover tonight, I'd be happy to share that with you as you